No pain, no gain. And to start things off, we start with the Steelers wide receivers, Jeff, and they came out of their latest war with the Baltimore Ravens. And let's start with Hines Ward, a helmet-to-helmet hit with Ray Lewis. These two have been going at it for a long time. But the encouraging news, both reality and fantasy-wise, is that Hines Ward is expecting to play, according to several articles. He's got concussion symptoms in his situation, but he's doing well, according to Mike Tomlin. What's the latest with Hines Ward?
Sounds like Ward's going to be available. The big thing with Hines Ward was I really was impressed and a little bit disappointed by two things that the Steelers medical staff did in that game against Baltimore. You know, one of the first things they did when you saw that helmet-to-helmet hit, you knew it was a violent hit. One of the first things that I kind of noticed was if you notice Ward's hands go up and go rigid, and that's called the fencing response, and that's kind of a good indicator that there is a head injury going on.
You mentioned that, not to interrupt you, but you mentioned we've used the Javid Best college video all the time, and you often use that video as an example because the arms went straight up afterwards. Yep. And when they go straight up, you called it what? The fencing response?
Fencing response. It's usually a pretty good indicator that something's going on with the brainstem, and it's just it's an automatic response to trauma. And you kind of saw it with Ward. It was a little bit guarded by the camera angle, but you kind of see his hands go up, and he definitely needed some help getting up. He was woozy coming off the field. And if you notice, one of the first things the medical staff did is they took his helmet, and they kept his helmet. And that's an old athletic trainer's trick, because if you take the helmet, they can't return to the field of play without their equipment. So a lot of times you'll see if they suspect a concussion, they'll take the helmet and go and hide it. That way the player can't go back in. The one thing I was a little bit frustrated by was to hear that they originally called it a stinger, and some of their sideline reports were saying that he had suffered a stinger. That really, it's possible, but there wasn't any clear indication that this was more than just a stinger. You know, I really was looking at it thinking, man, that's at least a concussion. You could tell by the way his eyes were glassy and the way he was walking off. And by labeling it a stinger, the Steelers likely were able to keep him on the sideline, even if he wasn't playing. He's a vocal guy and a leader, but protocol now demands that these concussed players go back to the locker room to a quiet environment to be evaluated. And I think by labeling it a stinger, it may have been a way that they could get around that. You know, I'm not saying that was the case, and he could have had some stinger-like symptoms, but I think it's a little bit fishy from what I saw from afar.
Jeff, I was a little guy who played college football and played it a lot bigger than I thought I was, so I'm very familiar with what a stinger is. But when football fans hear the term stinger, and you just delineated between a stinger and a concussion, talk about that.
A stinger is a brachial plexus injury, and what happens is there's a huge bundle of nerves that run from your neck to your shoulder right here. And a lot of times what happens is you'll see the shoulder pad get lowered and the neck get hit, and you'll overstretch that bundle of nerves, and it'll send tingling sensations all the way down into your hand, into your fingertips, and that's a brachial plexus injury. That's a stinger. A burner is another name for it, but it's a nerve injury. It's often results, like I said, from impact or overstretching. It's not quite as serious, but it can cause some weakness in the arm, and it can be very painful. So it's something that happens a lot in football, particularly because of the way people are getting tackled and getting hit like that.
Beaver County Times has an article, and they say, quoting Mike Tomlin and talking about Hines Ward, that he expects to play. Tomlin says he's doing well. Interestingly, for the Steelers, they play probably the surprise team in the NFL, and I say surprise because with all the talk about the Niners and the Lions, nobody's really focusing on the Cincinnati Bengals. And the Bengals and Steelers will now play each other twice in the next month. They play 1 o'clock this Sunday in Cincinnati, I believe, and then it's the Steelers' bye. So they're going to need Hines Ward in this game.
You know, the big thing for him is not only are they going to need him, but Emmanuel Sanders, one of their other receivers, is out after having arthroscopic surgery on his knee. You know, what's really helping out Ben Roethlisberger is, we already learned that Mike Wallace is a big-name talent, but the emergence of Antonio Brown has been huge for Roethlisberger. You know, I kind of mentioned him last week, and I still think if he's available in a lot of leagues, you got to go get this guy. I mean, he had 5 catches for 109 yards. Over the last 3 weeks, he's got 35 targets. He's quickly becoming a top option for Roethlisberger, and he's going to get you some points. He's got 21 catches and nearly 300 yards in the last 3 games. He hadn't found the end zone as much as I would like, but again, I still think if you need wide receiver help, I know there's a lot of guys banged up. Brown should probably be your top target if he's out there on the waiver wire.
You know, the other thing before we let go of the Steelers is it time? It seems like every year there's a stretch. Is it time for Heath Miller? Does Heath Miller start getting some focus here and get that 3-game stretch that he has always seemed to have since he came into the league, or am I imagining that?
He always seems to do that. The frustrating thing is he'll put those 3 games like you said, but then he'll do nothing the other week. So it's always a big gamble if you run you have to throw him out there. I'm not sold on Heath Miller as far as an everyday starter, but if you've got a bye week or some injuries, he's at least worth the gamble to maybe get you a touchdown or two. Again, Big Ben's throwing the ball well. They're moving the ball around extremely well in that offense. So I really think, if you're desperate for somebody, you could do worse than Miller.